it has the entire section on here. It has the logo, old logo, has this paper on here as well, and it has a couple pieces of text. So I have the text kind of listed here down at the bottom here. So what it asks you to do is to type out whatever the information is you're going to have, and then putting it in separate fonts, but it's much easier to just double click and highlight this and change the fonts as you go. And if you double click one word, it'll highlight it. You can just go through these sample parts and see, and while it's still there, just go ahead and increase that part. So what I've done is I've jumped ahead and not only placed in this information for the lettering, but also have changed the logo here. So I'll take this one off and placed in a new logo for this part. So when I zoom out, I have this particular section listed in here. So as you go through the text boxes, it's having you picking colors, so foreground to background color. Taking a look at this text, they do it a little bit differently, and I'll demonstrate, but just to show it to you. Here's the text layer, and it's a good idea to duplicate it so that you have a piece. I'm just going to change the color of that layer, and just so I know it, and hide it. But this particular layer of type that you see, just going to go to type and rasterize that layer. So now it's editable just as text. And now you're going through and taking sections like this, and it'll highlight that part. And if you want to change the color of the lettering, you can, but just to start off, I'll pick a foreground color, and when you go to Shift Delete, it brings up the fill button. So here it is, where it's going from behind, and it's also picking the foreground color. And when you click OK, it automatically brings that. While it's still selected, it's on this layer. Just go to Layer and Cut. So now it's cut apart from that particular piece. So just keep going back to this section, highlight this piece, and as I grab a different color, I can do the same thing. Click the Shift Delete, and now that button is going through that section. So as you can see, this is just as a normal. If it was multiply, it lets some of the pieces go back. And here it's going Layer, New, Cut. So now you have these two sections, and just keep going back to this segment here, making a couple of cuts. Here it is. I'm going to click the background color this time, and while it's still selected, Layer, New is cut. You can see the keystroke for it, but now I have all of these layers. So I just have to make sure I keep going back to that particular layer to do this, and there it is. So just lightly placing that on here. So now I just want to make sure I have foreground selected. Okay, and go to Layer, New, and Cut, and just keep an eye that the foreground, or at least that layer style, is set up there. So here I have it. This time I want to change the color of the type. So if I hit Shift Delete, it'll bring that part up, but if I hit Option Shift Delete, it'll change it to the foreground color. Command Shift Delete changes to the background color. And now when I hit Shift Delete, it brings up the fill, and I can fill this with blue while it's still selected. Just go to Layer and cut it across. So it takes a couple minutes, but once you get the section highlighted there, you can kind of see that part. So again, if I want to fill that with blue, and now take a darker blue, and then just allowing myself to slowly kind of build up all of these fonts. So here's a career. I may even be a little bit concerned and take some of the color scheme that's on the logo itself. So there's that part right there. and see if I can't bring that up as a foreground color. So now I have that section. The last one I don't have to move, but now I have all these parts and pieces, and I want to move them around a little bit, so I'm going to take the selection with auto select, and that allows me to just click on and move these so that they're a little bit placed together. And once they're there, then I have all of these layers, just kind of showing you by clicking on them, plus the logo. Okay, so the logo I have above this, I'm going to drag this down a little bit. So now I have all these layers, and I just shift key them and it selects them all. And in the submenu I can just go to, it says merge the layers, so now they're all in one layer themselves. Okay, so once you have that, it's just having you put a little bit of a drop shadow to show through the section there, and that way it'll have that piece that you can adjust. I can always go back and cut these, but I didn't bother. So just double click. Here's the drop shadow piece on the screen. You can adjust it. You can lay it in there just a little bit so it's not hovering too much. Soften that shadow up a bit. Click OK. So now you have this part that's on the edge. And then the last part, or a couple parts they have, is putting some of the crumpled paper texture. Here's the texture of the paper. So you can actually just duplicate the layer and bring it above this font. You can see it's above it, and hold Option, and so it's going to be a clipping mask. So it's just going to be on those layers of text, and you can see it. So I'm just going to lower down the opacity of it. You can also put it to multiply, or at least set it so that the texture goes through it. And you can also, so it's not perfectly lined up there, you can adjust it so it gives a little bit of texture to some of those paper pieces, or use a different file altogether that has it on there. So here you can drop this off. Selecting a layer behind it for the glue is just kind of dragging beneath this. Just type in glue, and here you're taking a gray color with a hard-edged brush. So here's the brush. Here's a hard edge for it. And you're just kind of sloppily a little bit placing it right on the pieces underneath this part. So when you kind of see that highlighted. So it's just kind of setting it in there, depending on how you place it. And that gets you that section. And then using color balance, right now it's just gray. Image adjust, color balance, or you can go up on the layer, just make sure preview's highlighted. You can add a little bit of orange by yellow and red in there. Lightens that part, changes the color a little bit. Click OK. And then double click to get a little bit of bevel and emboss in order to soften up that color. You can take this off of that section. You can kind of see the depth of the shadow, how soft it's going to be. Click OK. Take the opacity, kind of let it be a little softer than that. And you kind of have it basically pretty set up. You can still go in and shade some of the lettering and some of these parts that are here just with a dodge and burn. You can try some of the techniques that way. So if you burn it, you can kind of see above this. This is 82% for the highlights, so you can see that it's shadowing that some. So you can kind of give a little texture to it for that. And you can also lift some of the paper up, change a little bit, give yourself that section to it. But there you go.